Built in 1957, Laguna Seca filled the need for a dedicated racing circuit near Pebble Beach, California, during America's road racing explosion, and that need hasn't yet gone away. Pushing through noise ordinances in the area, WeatherTech Raceway at Laguna Seca continues to draw historic and iconic sanctioning bodies that hold paths just as storied as this 2.238-mile circuit, famous for the elevation changes up to and away from the world-famous Corkscrew. While we won't quite get to the 1 minute 7 second lap record set here by Elio Castroneves in 2000, we are getting ready to send a hungry pack of GT4 BMWs and Porsches and Audi TCRs around Laguna Seca's hallowed grounds at quite a high rate of speed. Welcome, race fans, to Sim TV. We're live to the Sim TV Facebook and the Washington, D.C. Region SCCA Facebook page this evening. I'm Andrew Cardinale IV. I've got Tom O'Gorman alongside me in the virtual commentary booth this evening, and this is Sim TV's live coverage of the Washington, D.C. Region Virtual Racing League. We join you tonight from the virtual Monterey, California at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. And Tom, this place just oozes racing.
Yeah, good to be with you, Andrew, and you're completely right. Not only in real world is it one of the most iconic racetracks, but specifically in video gaming, at least to me, this is the iconic racetrack. This was the first track that I drove in a video game that is from real life, way back in Gran Turismo days. And ever since it was licensed to be in video games, it's been a staple no matter what you're racing. So tonight we're playing in iRacing with GT4 cars and TCRs. And like you said, absolutely iconic to come to Laguna Seca for round 3 of the DC Region Virtual Racing League.
And now I haven't been here for the first round or so of this championship, but Tom, with Kyle Heyer tending to his real life opportunities as he can get them, of course, I'm happy to fill in this evening, and I'm new to some of these names, but I did watch the COTA race earlier today, and I can tell you that these TCRs certainly have a go of it here in qualifying, and they're pretty fun to watch as well. I took a few laps earlier today in these TCRs, and it's a pretty tricky place to get around when you have front-wheel drive. We'll go ahead and throw up our SimTV track map. You see, this place was originally almost oval-shaped. It had a bit of a bend, obviously, with a corkscrew, and then heading down the hill from the corkscrew through what was turns 7, 8, and 9 to finish up the lap. But somewhere around the 1980s, they changed things up. They lengthened the racetrack between what are now turns 2 and turn 6, effectively creating the Andretti hairpin and really changing this racetrack up, I think, for the better.
Yeah, it was added for MotoGP back in, I think, 1988, and it's now got a kind of two-personality split halfway through the track. All of the original corners are really high speed, really ballsy corners. There's a lot of elevation involved, but the newer corners that were added in 1988, where the cars are now, they're very flat. They're more precise. There's less gusto involved and more precision involved in those corners. So you kind of go through the lap back and forth between precision and really sending it in there and trusting that the car is going to stick. This is one of the trickiest corners, diving up turn 6 towards that iconic corkscrew, and then you're staring at the sky for the entire climb up before you drop a couple of stories off a cliff. Now, the corkscrew itself is really not the biggest challenge on the track. It's pretty straightforward once you know where to aim the car, but this next corner, Rainy Curve, turn number 9, is the event of the entire lap. It's another 7-story drop, and it spits you out with a big compression at the apex. You have barely enough time to get the car back to turn 10, and then it drops into another bowl corner for number 10. So those, I think, are the highlight of the lap for me. These TCR cars are really quick around this lap, especially on the brakes. And talking to the drivers, the TCR cars shine really well on the brakes, but don't get off the corners quite so well.
And we can see just how fast they're going around this circuit this evening. Elias Roman, I believe he set the pole in the TCR category back at COTA. That's my big reference that I'll go back to this evening. So I know this 99 is pretty quick. We see some other drivers joining him up there. We've got Robert Kucera in second place, just a half second back. I would imagine these times are going to slowly kind of constrict, and they're going to get closer and closer together. We're going to have a pretty darn close pack, I would assume, especially if some of these guys can sniff a little bit of slipstream. Obviously, you don't want to get aero push in some of these corners, but if you can use some of the dirty air ahead of you actually to your advantage down the straightaways, which there are a few, you just might be able to squeak out an extra tenth or so and really be able to close this pack up.
Yeah, these TCR cars have a knack for qualifying close and racing close, and nothing was closer than last week at Donington Park. We had 3 different leaders. We're watching Elias Roman on screen right now. He was the winner from COTA, but he actually came up a little bit short last week. Had an incident, I think maybe in lap traffic, if memory serves, and he finished second to Robert Kucera, who sits second on the grid for tonight's race. So those two are going to be battling back and forth. Third last week was Forrest Landy. And I believe he is not on the grid or doesn't have a lap time in the books, but it's John Chrissy who's back up into third position in TCR right now. So as you can see, less than a second covering the top 3. This is among the largest spreads we've had actually in TCR so far this season.
And of course, this could be the track where we have a larger split. It's a pretty technical course, and there's a lot of chances to mess up. Quite honestly, it is actually one of the tougher courses, which is interesting because it is one of the kind of rookie tracks, if you will, in iRacing. You come up through the Mazda ranks and go through places like Laguna Seca in order to earn your stripes here on iRacing.com. So the fact that this is one of the rookie tracks, very interesting, given that it is rather technical. It will definitely beat you up as a driver over the course of this 40-minute race later on.
Well, it's perfect you say that, actually, because after we wrapped up at Donington Park last week, all the drivers hopped on the next day and started practicing for Laguna Seca, and some of the front runners in the different classes sent out some messages saying, hey guys, just because we all know Laguna Seca doesn't make it easy. Holy cow, this place is kind of hard. So because this place is pretty short, the corners, like I said, there's a lot of variety, but it is a relatively low-speed track. It's really hard to be precise and just put in lap after lap after lap. So I think we're going to see mistakes tonight. I think one of the things that will come into play is that 25-point incident limit. Again, the drivers maybe, if they got a little complacent on their practice this week because, oh, it's just Laguna Seca and we all know it, I don't know that that's actually going to really bode very well for them.
No, absolutely. You cannot fall back on your previous Miata knowledge or what have you here on iRacing just to get around this place. You've got to put in practice time every time you come here, and you know you're coming here in a league like this. And, well, we see an big off right there. That's for Peter Lausen. That's a heavy hit there into turn 6. And you see the new damage model here on these TCRs. It's not really so new anymore, is it? It's been around for quite a while, a few months, but it's still pretty cool to see the parts and pieces actually fly off. We are getting close to the end of our TCR qualifying. Of course, our 25-minute session split into 2 parts by the series admins. There's a 1-minute buffer to get the TCRs off the racetrack safely and the Porsches and BMWs onto the racetrack pretty conveniently and efficiently. So these guys are coming up to, let's see, 2 minutes to go in their session because they're racing to 13 minutes to go on the timer on your ticker. So 2-minute warning for all these drivers on the racetrack now.
We should say a new driver on pole position, the 34 car right there on your screen, David Alessi. He has not competed with us yet this season that I'm aware of. I'm looking at the championship results. Looks like he actually did race with us at COTA. I don't know where he actually finished. Looks like he's got 2 top 10s, but usually TCR is only around 12 cars. So he's been in the hunt this season, but we haven't seen much of him towards the front. And not entirely out of nowhere, but he's definitely found some speed this week at Mazda Raceway Laguna, or WeatherTech Raceway. WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, dropping a tire in turn 6, keeps the foot in it and drags the TCR car front-wheel drive straight. But David Alessi's on pole right now by 0.2 of a second over Elias Roman. Rob Kucera, who was the number 2 car that we saw slip sliding maybe a minute or 2 ago, that's actually, looks like that car is extremely loose. He's been loose the entire session, and this is right towards the end. So he's got the rear tires on that car absolutely up to temperature, but it looks like that car's set up very free this week to get it to turn, probably through those flatter corners of turns 2, 3, 4, and 5. Mostly turns 3 and 4. Look at the back end just float down into, and he actually bails out. That car went for a big slide in the Andretti hairpin a couple laps ago, and then we saw him flick it into turn 3 and go for a big flat slide too. So the Murphy-Nichols machine looks a little more planted. This is the number 5, but different setups for different drivers looks like in TCR.
And I noticed that you really have to take everything that you know from some low-powered sports cars and throw it just completely out of your mind if you're going to drive one of these things around this place. Of course, just for example, one of the keys to the race actually we're going to talk about is track limits. Of course, we also have to get through just navigating traffic and managing your passing opportunities. But I noticed as soon as you drop a wheel in these, you tend to go actually further off the racetrack, where usually in a rear-wheel drive, be it front engine or rear engine motor vehicle, you're going to, wow, that was a I'm actually impressed that he saved it at first. He ends up bailing off into the tire barrier, so I'm impressed he saved that car at first. But no, normally in a rear-wheel drive car, you drop a wheel and get it off into the dirt, and you're actually going to spin around back onto the racetrack or whatever. You're going to lose traction on the outside tires. But in the TCRs, it seems it's a bit different, and it actually just drags you off into the dirt further. We still have one more Audi on the racetrack, but I think he's going to be coming in soon. That's Andrzej Blanc, and all the GT4 cars heading now on to the racing circuit to get their 12 minutes of qualifying in.
And it's a mad rush. We see them stack up to leave pit lane, and when the admins say go, they tack her up and dump her. And the first car on the track is DJ Alessandrini, who's your defending winner or the first round winner at COTA, but actually fell back to third last week at Donington Park. So he's the championship leader, is what I meant to say, but actually had a little bit of a run-in with lap traffic last week, was taken out of the lead, and ended up finishing third in that number 61 car. He's been bouncing back and forth between the Porsche Cayman and the BMW, this week electing the Cayman. The general consensus has been that the Cayman is usually a faster car. It just comes down to where the cars make speed as to whether or not you want to be racing a Cayman or a BMW.
Yeah, and of course, the Porsche is a bit more lively, the rear engine, and they can attack the corners a bit harder, but the BMWs definitely have that advantage on straightaways. It can certainly get up out of a corner. We'll see how they get around this place this evening. I'd imagine it'll go towards the Porsches as opposed to the BMWs. It's probably why you see DJ in a Porsche Cayman 718. Everybody getting out of the racetrack, as you mentioned there, Tom, and it really is a mad dash, not only to get onto the racetrack, but also bring those tires up to temp as quickly as they can. Of course, tire temp is everything in these GT4 cars on iRacing.com, and you've really got to make the most out of warming up your tires and then utilizing that moment where you have perfect tire temps to actually set your fastest lap.
Yeah, with only about 12 minutes in qualifying, you're going to use up close to half of that just getting the car into prime condition. So we're not going to see those pole laps really set until laps 3, 4, and maybe even 5 with how short the laps are here. But we're taking a look at Paul Darling, who also had a great run at COTA, was a little further back after a mistake or two last week at Donington. And Donington really turned into kind of what we compared it to Lime Rock, because it ended up being this kind of bullring race where people were elbowing each other out of the way. There was a lot of interaction between the TCR and GT4 classes, and it turned into a pretty chaotic race, and Paul Darling got caught out with that. He's chasing Alex LaRose, who goes for a big slide through the apex at turn 6 up in front of him. The blue car behind him is Ken House-Seal, and those four are all absolutely contenders. But last week it was a BMW show with Ryan Maloney taking the win over Andrew Pilata and DJ Alessandrini. Those top three were all in BMWs last week, and that's because the BMW, when it is close on raw pace to the Porsche, it's very, very difficult to pass. It's very fast in a straight line, and it handles the curbs a little bit better, and that tended to race better at Donington Park. This week it looks like the Porsche is going to get the nod as it did at COTA, so kind of an ebb and flow of marks between. There's a look at the first of the BMWs. That's the 25 car.
Yeah, this is Jonathan White. Some of the fast flying laps starting to come in and register on your ticker. At the top left of your screen, you'll see all the blue boxes with yellow numbers come in. Of course, those are your GT4 category. The yellow boxes with blue numbers, those are your Audi TCRs. So starting to see some of the GT4 times registered. DJ Alessandrini, of course, goes to the top of the board. Ken House-Seal along there with him, Alex LaRose. So I think three names that you'd expect to go up there so far. Jonathan White, he originally went quickest. He's now dropped into fourth. Andrew Pilata in fifth place. You see Daniel Gross in sixth, and Evan Shaquille, I'm probably butchering that terribly, there in seventh spot. I will say, of course, the Porsche seems like it's a bit more lively, can attack the corners a bit better, but this BMW M4 looks really, really cool.
Yeah, and it's generally considered to be the easier of the two to drive, although this weekend, talking to a couple of the drivers, the window that the Porsche allows on getting into the corners here at Mazda Race or WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, how many times am I going to do that tonight? Here at Laguna Seca, the BMW is just kind of harder to get to the apex, and that's because it's a little bit pushier on the front end. It's a little more numb on entry, which can make it safer, but just in general, getting into the corner is tough here at Laguna Seca, where the Porsche can be surprisingly a little more forgiving in making sure that you get the car into the corner and then off the corner. So that's why I think we're seeing a tip of the hat to the Porsche this week as Paul Darling goes to the top over Alex LaRose, Alessandrini back to third. And Ryan Maloney hops up into the top 5 as well. So now it's Darling, LaRose, Alessandrini, Hausiel, and Maloney. I'm curious, is Maloney still in the BMW?
Looks like Maloney is. No, he is in a Porsche 718, so the car choice certainly going to be something to follow all season long here in the Washington, D.C. region racing league, and it's something to keep up with for sure. A lot of leagues here in iRacing will usually force drivers to stay in the same car all season long, but it seems like these guys embracing the fact that each track is going to favor something different, and more technical course, the Porsche is a little bit more favored over the BMW, so not really a surprise there. And I will be surprised, I guess, to see probably a BMW break into the top 5. That said, over the course of 40 minutes, there's a lot of time to try and figure out that BMW, and it is just kind of a whole different bear to try and wrestle around this place. So I'll be impressed, actually, if anybody can go up there and put a BMW safely in the top 5.
Well, I think one of them's close. The 25 of Jonathan White is in 6th, so he's the top BMW right now. I know Andrew Pilata has been driving a BMW for this season. Not sure if he's back in it this week, but that would make 2 of them up in the top 8. But that brings us to another one of the keys of the race, which is battling in traffic. And that was really the highlight, the storyline of last week's race at Donington Park. But this track is not much longer, and that means that we're definitely going to see lap traffic come into play at the front of GT4 once they catch the back of the TCR field. But more importantly, this season, the front of the TCR cars have had to do a lot of dealing with the back of GT4 traffic, and occasionally the front of GT4 once they get around the lap. So something that happens a lot here at Laguna Seca is the TCR cars are really good on the brakes, and they can get into the corner pretty well, but they don't get off the corner very well relative to the GT4 cars, especially the Cayman. And once those cars get kind of into the entry of the corners in the same zone, the GT4 cars almost have to be a little bit of a bully to get into the corner and try to have an opportunity to pass the TCR cars. And I think picking your places is going to be really important between the classes today.
We are seeing a BMW, and actually a slew of BMWs, I think 3, probably a trio would be better, getting up close to or into the top 5 now. Tony Chow has broken into the top 5 in his number 14 BMW M4. So he's behind Christopher Laprousse. I'm sorry. Lapras. That makes a lot more sense than what I was trying to say. I don't know. Paul Darling sits 3rd. You see Alex LaRose, DJ Alessandrini still at the top part of your running order. The speed charts definitely favoring the Porsche. Andrew Pilata, he is in a BMW. You mentioned him kind of favoring the BMW so far, and looks like he sticks with that. Ryan Maloney, I believe he's that Porsche you brought up, and Ken Hausiel in 8th place. These guys getting very mixed around so far. I'm glad you mentioned the fact that the TCRs are going to overlap into some of the back end of the GT4 field. The TCR and GT4 categories are actually quite close on the racetrack. It doesn't really matter where you go unless it's a big straightaway place, Daytona, Sebring, whatever. It seems like they can absolutely run with one another pretty darn closely. And actually, I've had some experiences with the league where we actually BOP'd the GT4s down to TCR spec, and it did not take very much. And they were certainly all over one another. So I would definitely look for a lot of mingling between classes, and that's why we have it as just navigating traffic. It could be any kind of traffic. It could even be cones if they take out those pit exit cones.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, here in iRacing, the TCR and GT4 cars are spec'd very similarly to the Michelin Pilot Challenge, which is the sister series to this class in real life, class I have experience in. But in the overall global terms, when you put a TCR car in full trim on a racetrack, it's the exact same speed as a full trim GT4 car. So here in the simulated Michelin Pilot Challenge and the iRacing service, they slow the TCR car down a little bit so that they're not completely banging door handle to door handle, but it doesn't take much, as Elias Roman is still somewhere around the top 20, it looks like, right just outside the top 20 maybe overall. Yeah, so he was able to reclaim the pole back there in TCR, and that is about midway through the pack.
Yeah, so the TCR is definitely going to make their names known. Up until now, where Lex Kiracek goes 20th overall, 19th in GT4 class, we actually had the top 2 from the Audis in the top 20 overall, which is actually quite impressive considering we have, let's see, 27 GT4 cars, no, 29 actually, if they all connect and get on the racetrack this evening. So we had them, they're still intermixed actually throughout the entire back end of the field. From 20th on back, it's just an alternating current, or if you will, of blue and yellow number plates. So definitely mixing things up back there. Something to watch this evening. Up at the front, though, DJ Alessandrini staying up top. P1, and he's got almost a half second back to Alex LaRose, rather. I don't know if that gap is really going to narrow either.
Well, and we see this pretty typically from DJ, where he has just the raw pace almost always, and then the races sometimes come much closer. Not always at the front when the checkered flag flies, but it's not uncommon to see him take the pole position. So it looks like he's going to bail out with about 2 minutes left. And once we start talking about race time, we've been talking a lot about the interaction between the two classes. As always with the DC region, there will be approximately 20 seconds between the classes at the green flag. So the TCR cars will all be gridded behind the entirety of GT4's class, and then they will have a little bit of a pause before they take their green flag. So we'll get a GT4 start, a bit of a break, and then the TCR start. So they don't start totally intermingled as they would in the real world with this series, but that does give a little bit of a breather before the action really gets chaotic for the top of TCR, as they tend to make their way into the back of GT4 cars within 2 or 3 laps.
Yeah, I would certainly expect to see a wide variety of cars racing one another, not just the manufacturer battles that you have in GT4 with BMW and Porsche, but again, those Audis going to change things up. Heavy hit there for Ken Halseal. He's up to second place, though, and actually chips into Alessandrini's, there we go, lead up at the top spot. He chipped into it by about 0.03 of a second. So he gets a little bit closer than Alex LaRose could in the number 7, but the 23 is still over 0.4 behind our pole sitter. Christopher Lapras sits in 4th place, Paul Darling 5th, Ryan Maloney 6th, Chow, Pallotta, Kessel, and White round out your top 10 in GT4 with just 44, now 43, 42, 41 seconds left in qualifying.
I suspect Ken Halseal had that car in the sweet spot before he stuffed it into the wall, so that's unfortunate, as he may have been on a run that could have gotten closer or potentially even topped Alessandrini's lap, but that makes it Porsche's in the top 5. The top BMW is actually Tony Chow back in 7th, and then Pallotta and White are definitely in BMWs as well. I don't know what Kessel is driving, but that would make it a little bit of a majority Porsche top 10 in GT4.
And that's Andrew Kessel there in the number 13 car, so he's in the Porsche as well. And yeah, certainly Porsche bias, and it's just because it being rear engine, it's a little more, I guess, apt to get around these technical corners, of course. It's just the fact that it has the rearward weight bias, so not surprising, but I do expect actually probably 1 or 2 of these pretty quick BMWs to mix it up and give these Porsches a run for their money up front. I do think we're still going to see probably that top 3 check out and have their own little race between DJ, Ken, and Alex, but I don't know, 4th, 5th on back, maybe even 3rd, the bottom step of the podium might be up for grabs for one of these M4s.
Well, and once the classes start to overlap, anything can happen. As we saw last week, Alessandrini had broken out about a 5 or 6 second lead, and then one touch with a TCR car. He didn't even go around. He just got a touch, went for a little bit of a slide, and that was enough to knock him out of the pole position, or the top spot, and give Ryan Maloney and Andrew Pallotta, who were having an amazing race with Chris Lapras, those 3 all kind of charged through, and it took Alessandrini the entire race to work his way back onto the podium. But that's going to be a really critical part of tonight's race. Now, I think last week they overlapped twice. The GT4 leaders ended up lapping a majority of the TCR cars twice. Tonight, I don't suspect that will happen in the 40-minute race. I think it'll only happen once. They will probably catch the leaders of TCR within the last maybe 5 to 10 minutes of this race. So that will continue to change the face of this race all the way up to the checkered flag. But the other thing that has really been challenging this season is the lack of time to warm the cars up before the green flag and just surviving lap number 1. I think we're going to see, I don't know if Laguna Seca is one of those tracks that gives you a full warm-up lap or not, but the tracks we've been driving on at Coda and Donington, you had a very, very short run up to the green flag, which meant very cold tires once that flag dropped.
Yeah, so actually here at Laguna Seca, unless we have the short parade lap ticked on, we do have a full or nearly full parade lap for these guys to get formed up. I don't recall if it goes all the way through turn 1, but I know you have to go at least through the corkscrew. You have to go quite a long portion of this place, so it actually can cause problems sometimes pacing through the corkscrew. That's generally pretty tough. Racing is, I think, easier, actually, because you're at full song. But before we get into the grid here, before we go down our starting grid this evening, I do want to mention that we have some partners to give a shout out to. We have RP Performance out of Summit Point, West Virginia, a race prep shop specializing in Mazda MX-5s. Also want to give a shout out to Motorsports Solutions. I'm used to simulation being from iRacing.com, but Motorsports Solutions, there we go, out of Summit Point, West Virginia as well. And OG Racing out of Sterling, Virginia. You can get helmets, suits, cameras, etc. over at OG Racing. Basically anything auto sports related, from what I can tell. We do want to go, of course, down our starting grid. Tom, go ahead and walk us down row 1.
Starting on pole, DJ Alessandrini with a near half-second margin over Ken Hausil will start alongside in the 23 car.
Starting row number 2, we've got Alex LaRose and Paul Darling in that 155 car.
And then next, the 183 of Christopher Lapras will start alongside the 15 of Ryan Maloney, last week's race winner.
Row 4, we get Tony Chow and Andrew Pilata in the number 32. Those guys just inside the top 10.
Behind them, Jonathan White in the 25 car, and Andrew Kessel squeaks into the top 10 in the 13.
If you go back to row number 6, you get Sam Scott and Greg Hubler actually round out your top 12.
And then on the 7th row, Evan Schickel in the 33 will start alongside Kevin Zhu in the 243.
Starting 15th, it's Andrew Chow in the number 29, Thomas Layton to his outside in the 16th spot.
And then behind the 11 of Danny Gross, who had a heck of a race last week, starting alongside Mark LeBance in the 3 car in 18th.
Back in 19th spot, it's Darren Heath, Lex Kirachek to his outside in the 67.
And then it's going to be Chad Griffith alongside Scott Merker, who will be alongside him once the fields are sorted out side by side. David Thompson, Francois Brew, Chris Spiller, Calvin Wong, and Daniel Huertas will round out a majority of the GT4 field before Elias Roman, who was on pole in TCR.
And of course, the admins will sort out the intermixing of the 2 categories here, so we'll just let the rest of the field go on by. You can see some of the TCR drivers back here and how they will sort out, so that should also change up, I believe, where the leader will start actually the race for the Audi TCR category. So, of course, they have to give some space up to the GT4s to make sure this start goes nicely and cleanly, make sure everybody else can kind of run their own race, of course, between the 2 categories. There you go, Travis Trussell, the final car on the racetrack. 43 cars here at Laguna Seca. That's certainly interesting. A lot of times you have 43 cars, man, and it turns into a chaotic time, but I think these guys can handle it, seeing how they ran at Coda and Donington to start the season off. And they're starting to form up. They do get that full formation lap, Tom.
Yeah, that's good. This is going to be the longest time they have to warm the tires up, and I was going to mention back in TCR, Elias Roman will start alongside David Alessi, then Robert Cusera, John Chrissy is 4th, Peter Lausen is 5th, alongside Murphy Nichols in 6th, who's been clawing for a top 3 multiple times before having run-ins. Just bad luck for that car throughout this season. So there are a number of contenders back in TCR, and they should start 30th on back overall. So that will, again, be a split start, but plenty of time to get the front tires and rear tires, well, mostly rear tires warmed up on the TCRs, but then more importantly, the GT4 cars really need some temp before they are happy. So this will be a nice relief after some very short warm-up periods at Donington and Coda, getting a whole lap here at Laguna Seca. Look how dirty it is.
And DJ Alessandrini is having to go by the entire field. I wonder if he was stalled the car or something happened to the 61. He's having to go by everybody to get back up to P1. Thankfully, he'll retain his pole starting position, but that is hectic stuff, especially coming through those tight corners. 5 and 6 are quite narrow, even in pacing. Now down the corkscrew for the first time this evening as a field. Also pretty hectic as a full pacing field. Getting ready to come down through the final few corners of the lap before we finally let these guys loose. And again, Laguna Seca is certainly a difficult racetrack to get around. You think you know it the entire time you're here on iRacing.com. It never ends up being that way. It's going to be quite a doozy this evening, quite a dandy. We're getting treated, not tricked. I know it's a couple of days old, but I wanted to fit it in anyways. Out of turn 11, though, we're going to come down the front stretch for the final time before we get going. The green flag flies, and we are racing at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca.
Wow, and look at Jonathan White from the 5th row, gets a good start, but they're going to be 3 wide back that far. Finally checks the brakes, so we're back to 2 by 2, and it's Allison Drini with the inside, but it's not too hard to hold the outside here. Alex LaRose gets a good run up the inside of Ken Hauseal, who might drop a position, keeps his nose in there, so we're still 2 by 2 through a majority of the field in GT4. Now Hauseal comes back on LaRose, and will probably sweep across his nose going into turn 4. Here's TCR.
TCR cars coming around to the start-finish line to start their race. There they go. They are off and racing. And the first TCR going to be, of course, the pole sitter in the number 99. Trying to get back up to him. I'm still learning some of these names. Elias Roman leading the field down into turn 1. And he's got that 34, one of the newcomers, I believe, to the front of the field at least. David Alessi right there with him. They get things sorted out, though, and it's back up to that GT4 battle because those guys were 3-4 wide at first to start things out. Rolling through the Andretti hairpin like a group like that, pretty sketchy.
Looks like Allison Drini is able to break away by a couple of car lengths over Ken Hauseal, who's got another couple of car lengths over Paul Darling. And LaRose has dropped back a number of positions. He might have got caught out on the outside of turns 3 and 4 early on this lap. And then that looks like the black car is Andrew Kessel, 15.
No, that's Ryan Maloney, actually.
It is
Going
Ryan
to the
Maloney.
outside into
Kessel's
11.
a little further
Oh!
back.
Look at Lapras. That was an interesting challenge into the braking zone for turn 11. I'm surprised he tried to look to the inside. I don't think he was committing to try and make a move, but still challenged him in there. I couldn't tell if he was going to try to go up the inside or not, but thankfully he got the car woed down. Sometimes you get into the ABS like that, and you're just along for the ride.
Yeah, and Maloney and Lapras were glued together last week in the BMWs. They both switched to the Porsches this week, and they're glued together again. With Alex LaRose kind of holding this pack up maybe a little bit before we get to the first BMW of Andrew Pilata, who's filling the mirrors of Chris Lapras. But Lapras in that 183 car, the white car with the red and blue, looks pretty racy. We're going to hop on board with Pilata through turn 4 on the second lap of this 40-minute race.
These guys all getting settled in, bringing the tires up to temp and trying to get into kind of a racing groove. They've got a long ways to go, though. Not quite anything like it's an endurance race. It's still pretty, I think it's in between. It's in between an endurance race for a single driver and a sprint race. But it's going to be a bit interesting for them to actually go all 40 minutes. Who was that off there? That was Alex LaRose. Surprised he caught that car. That was... You don't usually catch that when you go off in turn 6. Oh, door-to-door there with White. They get it sorted out for the Corkscrew, though.
And now Kessel tried to show a nose as well, and you're right, he got away with one there, and so did the rest of the field for that matter, because he could have easily shot back across into traffic, and he's going to slot back into place just at the bottom of the top 10. Tony Chow is running in 10th place, and he's the white BMW at the back of frame before a little bit of a gap to the rest of the field. I think that is Evan Schickel just outside the top 10, followed by Greg Hubler.
Hubler actually has the 11th spot over Thomas Layton and Daniel Gross. So these guys battling for 11th, 12th, and 13th on the racetrack behind that gaggle that is just inside the top 10. You mentioned Tony Chow bringing up the rear in the top 10, if you will, and we do have, I think, 3 BMWs in the top 10 so far with a couple more on the way. Don't want to forget about our Audi TCRs, though, this evening. Elias Roman still leading the way. You see the top 5 all pretty close together, and actually a challenge for 3rd spot.
Yeah, and we've seen in previous rounds that Roman typically has the pace to kind of pull away just a bit, which is unusual for TCR, but he's doing that now, and it's not going to be until they hit lap traffic that might come back. But Rob Kucera is filling the mirrors of David Alessi, who's in the orange 34 car. This is his best run of the season so far, running up in the 2nd place. And then Murphy Nichols, who started 6th. We said it in the start, he's been knocking on the door of a podium all season and has not had the best luck. Now Kucera gets a good run off of the Andretti hairpin, goes to the outside of Alessi, and Murphy Nichols in the 4th spot might be able to capitalize on this. Real quick at the front, we also had a change for the lead. Ken Hauseal has gotten around DJ Alessandrini somehow and taken the point.
Yeah, I'm actually very surprised by that pass for the lead. You'll notice the running order is going to mix up a little bit. Unfortunately, sometimes even when you set the iRacing or like the max cars to render here on iRacing in the graphics settings, it doesn't always render all 43. I can promise it's set to render I think 55 as max. It's not rendering all of them. So when we go back to the Audi TCR battle, you will see the GT4 cars on the leaderboard mix up a little bit. But once we come back up to these lead battles, it should sort itself out. So you'll just have to bear with us through that. But this is the live battle at the top 3 of the GT4 field. We've got Hausil, Alessandrini, and Darling all under a blanket battling through the intersection of Laguna Seca in through the exit of Sector 1, and I'm actually really surprised that they're all this close together.
Hausil dropping a tire off at turn 6, and right before that happened, I was going to say that DJ Alessandrini actually looked like the ragged one. He dropped a tire coming out of turn 10 on the previous lap, was throwing dirt, and then was really deep into the Andretti hairpin, and he was looking like he was making a number of mistakes, but then Ken Hausil just makes that mistake there and brings him right back close. Now, I was typically would give these drivers the benefit of the doubt that they won't race each other too much this early in the race, but I think they're all looking pretty racy as Paul Darling is hunting in the mirrors of the 61 car as well. They're going to dive into the hairpin, and you see that little bit of camber shoots you down the hill and now into Rainy Curve. Another 7-story drop at the apex, super late in this corner. You got to be really patient with the throttle and then hustle the car back to the left. I wouldn't be surprised to see these three kind of tone it down until they get into the TCR traffic, but Alessandrini, I think, wants that point back. Oh, look at Darling, so close to the bumper of the 61 car. And even with all this battling, they've pulled out a 2-second lead over Ryan Maloney, who's worked his way up into 4th.
These top 3 tank GT4s make me think more of Spec Miata racing, where they can just get nose to tail and start pulling away. I'm really surprised that they're actually pulling this gap, even over guys like Ryan Maloney, Christopher Lapras. I mean, they could easily get up there and start making tenths on them, but they're just not. They're not quite making up the gap on Paul Darling and company. Very surprised that they're able to do this, but hey, it's working out for them. Why would you change anything up? And it's great for TV. This is great stuff.
I'm super surprised to see that Alessandrini is able to use that big sausage curb on the inside of turn 4. And you can see it kicks the car up in the air, but it doesn't seem to mind. And that's atypical of what we've seen from the Porsches. Thinking back to Coda, those curbs at Coda would launch those cars into the air, almost into the next layer of the stratosphere almost. But here at Coda, here at Laguna Seca, they seem pretty content to hit at least that one red curb. Ooh, Ken Hausil is in super deep into the corkscrew, but he's not going to be able to do anything with this run. Alessandrini is going to show the nose, and Hausil actually looks like he got a cut penalty from that one. He's going to have to back off the pace and let both of those drivers through.
Likely a time penalty there for the 23 car, having to give a lot of time back. That's why he ran the outside line to try and run a bit slower and give these guys some time. Oh, now a challenge for the race lead. Paul Darling up the inside on exit. I don't know if he's actually going to be able to challenge into turn 1 because Alessandrini had the straighter exit off the corner, a bit more momentum, but the draft may change things up. The challenge down to T1. Paul Darling actually can go to the right side and try the outside line to the Andretti hairpin. Can he cross him up out of turn 2? Possibly. Oh, not quite. I actually thought he was going to try a little bit harder, but it is still within the first 10 minutes. These guys battling further back. This is the battle for 4th, where you see Ryan Maloney trying to defend from Lapras, and Lapras keeps trying to cross him up.
Yeah, Maloney, Lapras, and then Pilata, White, and LaRose are all in this one too. So this is a 5-car train battling for just outside the podium. And this, I think, in all of these things we've seen so far, the exchanges, is just how hard it is to be consistent at Laguna Seca. There's just something about it that prompts little mistakes here and there, and that's what's been happening so far at the front of both classes. And this battle for 4th is hot, but it looks like the top 2, when they're not bickering, Maloney and Lapras, those 2 are able to pull away just a bit from the BMW of Pilata, who, by all accounts, is probably a little bit hindered by the platform this week.
Yeah, I think the BMWs can almost equal the Porsches on overall pace, but out of every corner, I think they're just going to lack a little bit. So going up the hill towards turn 7 and, the corkscrew, it seems like they give up a little bit of time. They can kind of challenge into the corner, try and use all of that front weight to try and hook the car around. And then, of course, you have the straightaway to get going. But I'm not so sure that they can challenge on a corner-to-corner basis with those Porsches. You see the gap that they're able to get on corner exit just because I think they're settled a lot earlier than the BMWs are. I think most people are used to a front-engine car, but the rear-engine liveliness gives you a whole lot more opportunity to launch up out of the corner.
Yeah, and what we tend to see is that BMW is really good at leading. Ooh, whoa, it's challenged for 4th place. Lapras shows the nose on Maloney, who was really deep into the Andretti hairpin, made a small mistake, and they're going to go side by side now into turn 3. This is just how close it is. Oh, it's so tight between these two cars, and it looks like Maloney is going to have to relinquish the position to Lapras, and now Pilata tries around the outside, but I was going to say the BMW tends to be a better leader than it does a chaser. You got to wait for a mistake like what just happened there. Pilata's probably going to be able to take this position on the way into the corner, but no, look at that Porsche on the entry, just so composed and able to sweep around the outside. They're going to go side by side all the way up into turn 6.
And let's not forget LaRose in the middle of this battle. He's got a quick number 7 underneath him. He just has to get through this traffic, and now he finally gets to the left side of Pilata up the hill. Oh, Pilata just closes the door. All right. And now a little bit of a shot in the shorts going into turn 7. Also known as the Corkscrew, and down the hill they go, and wow. I'm surprised LaRose gave him that shot, but I'm even more surprised that Pilata moved over on him. Now, even closer down the hill and into turn 10.
That was super good racing between those two, and it's not done yet. Now Pilata has the lower hand. LaRose takes the spot, but look at the 25 of White, jumps up the inside. They were 3 wide for a minute into turn 11, and he's going to take the point. And now Pilata was able to hold the outside. LaRose in the middle of that 3 wide. The BMW starts to stretch its legs up the front straight. This is incredible for what is now down into 6th position between White, Pilata, and LaRose. They're side by side into the Andretti hairpin, and LaRose with the Porsche will close the door on what was a charging Pilata. He ends up being the big loser in the situation.
Well, that battle took our focus there for Bent Allison. Drini continues to lead over Paul Darling, Ken House-Seal. We drop back to our Audi TCR category. We still have Elias Roman leading the way, but now only challenged by Robert Kucera. So David Alessi has fallen back a bit. Murphy Nichols in 4th place. Will Robbins in 5th. Tom, I hear you coughing over there. Hopefully you're, I don't know, feeling all right.
Yeah, just a little tickle in the throat, but all that exciting action, I guess, got me going. Last week we were speculating that Rob Kucera, who's a pretty familiar name on Sim TV across a number of different series and really, really competitive in the MX-5 Cup stuff anytime we drive those Mazdas. The 99 car has been consistent. That's Elias Roman, has been really consistent this season. Rob Kucera came in last week at Donington, and we were speculating that he didn't have a lot of experience in the TCR car, and that kind of showed throughout the race as he was able to get quicker and quicker through the entire duration of that 40-minute race. He wasn't the fastest car at the beginning, but he did a really good job of kind of picking up the pace throughout the race and was able to take the win. And he was actually admitted at the end of the race to not having a lot of experience in the TCR cars. So I suspect he's really still on that learning curve and maybe just starting to plateau in his learning curve of being a very, very familiar iRacer, but not necessarily familiar with the TCR car. Looks like he's able to match the pace of Elias Roman, who's just less than a second up the road. Those two have broken away from David Alessi by a big margin, 3 seconds back to 3rd place in TCR.
So it seems like Elias Roman and Robert Kucera currently are scoring 2nd and 3rd, despite Roman definitely being the leader. It looks like John Christie, the 4th, has had to toe to the pit lane, momentarily taking the lead technically, but they will go on by him right there and recollect 1 and 2. So that sorts itself back out. We went on board with Kucera there, and it showed that he was currently in 3rd, and that's why I wanted to point that out. But they do sort themselves back out at the top of the running order in the Audi TCRs. Go a little further back in the TCR field, you see it's really sorted itself out to the top 5. Will Robbins and Murphy Nichols and David Alessi, 5th, 4th, and 3rd, respectively. So quite split up, actually. Not too many battles here in the Audi category, and it seems like they've actually had a few drivers have to retire this evening. So really, attention does mostly shift back up to the GT4s, where now Paul Darling has taken the race lead, and DJ has fallen back quite a bit.
And the question is, was TCR traffic involved? You can see they're working their way through the back of the TCR field, and it doesn't look like there was one really nearby. So something must have happened between these 3 drivers that allowed the 155 of Paul Darling to get up and has quite a bit of a lead, which means he can be a little more patient, a little more calculated in TCR traffic, where DJ Alessandrini and Ken House-Seal, who run 2nd and 3rd, they're going to have to be a little bit braver and a little bit more bully-ish to those TCR cars. Whoa, Darling drops a tire off of turn 6, and that brings us back to one of our keys of the race. There is a 25-point incident limit in place before they get a drive-through penalty in this race. And with that 25X rule, anytime you drop a tire, you get 1 point. If you get that 25 times, you're drawing through the pit lane, and that's going to ruin your race pretty quick.
Wow, that was a move by Ken Houseel down to the inside in turn 6. Get by one of those Audis. These guys definitely wasting no time to try and get by here, Tom. I shouldn't say I'm surprised to see them driving so aggressively around the TCRs, but it is definitely still shocking every time they make a move like that. DJ with a big run up to Paul Darling's back end, and he has closed in a ton. So, yeah, it had to be maybe he got spooked off the racetrack or something. We don't have the replay available, unfortunately, but I can't imagine that it would have just been a fault of his own because DJ's just so quick. I mean, he's already back to the back end of the 155 one lap later.
Yeah, Darling dropped that tire off at turn 4 and then just got really deep into turn 11 right there. And those 2 mistakes on the 1 lap allowed Alessandrini to get right back to his bumper. Now, Houseel had to make that ballsy move on the inside of the TCR lap traffic into turn number 6. And that's what's made him drop off of the back of this battle. So ebb and flow is starting with 24 and a half minutes left in this race. So we're still not even halfway through the 40-minute event. These TCR cars are really going to start to influence the battle at the front of GT4. Pretty surprised, though, the opposite is not true this week. It looks like the back of GT4 is doing a pretty good job of staying up in front of and pretty far clear of the leaders in TCR, Elias Roman and Rob Kucera.
Yeah, it's about a 7-second gap from, I believe, 15th place in GT4, Calvin Wong, back to Elias Roman, who's leading the TCR category. So they're actually quite separated. Again, 7.7 seconds or so, almost 8 seconds. As DJ, he looked back to the left side of Paul Darling. Of course, you don't want to go side by side into the corkscrew unless you have to, unless you're racing for a win, basically. But he at least showed the nose, and now down Rainy Curve, he's gonna, well, he showed the nose again. I think he's just showing Paul he wants back by.
Yeah, he really wants by, and DJ tends to be a really good, I want that position and I'm going to take it. And he doesn't necessarily drive away once he takes it, but he really wants to be in the front. But in history, Paul Darling tends to be incredibly difficult to pass. He's a pretty cool cat behind the wheel once he's in the front, and he does a really good job of controlling the pace of races if you let him at the front. So I think this is kind of a dangerous spot for the rest of the field to have Paul Darling at the front. Not really a surprise to see these top 3 names start to pull away. Lapras has somehow ended up completely by himself in 4th, with LaRose, Pilata, White, and Chow still in pretty close proximity for 5th on back.
You see the delta there. These guys actually a whole lot closer to that lap record around Laguna Seca than I initially thought. Only, 22 seconds off of it? That's actually not bad. So quite impressive, actually, for these GT4s. And just watching the gap on the bottom side of your screen and watching from the back end of Paul Darling's car at the nose of DJ Alessandrini. And again, DJ is just going to keep showing the nose, I think, until he can finally find an opportunity to get on by. Again, that was one of our keys to the race, managing passing opportunities. Now he gives him the flashers up the hill.
He's hunting back and forth, showing the nose in both sides, and I think that comes down to DJ's experience, knowing the way these races kind of tend to ebb and flow. Look how close he gets right at the apex of turn 9, but he knows that if he can get up in the front, he gets to choose his spots in the TCR traffic, whereas if he's behind, he's more likely to get caught out. So as they're starting to work their way into the mid-pack of TCR, that car is going to get out of their way pretty quickly, way off the track. So that one's a non-factor. But I think Alessandrini tends to be one of the drivers who thinks about playing the system, and the system of this race is part of managing traffic. That was Benson Ty that took a ride. And Alessandrini wants to play that to his advantage.
Still nose to tail here for the top 2. Ken Houseel just hanging around at this point, and we are nearing that halfway point in this 40-minute race, Tom. So these guys, I think, just about as settled in as they're going to be, and it's all just about downhill from here in about a minute and a half's time. So these guys got to start thinking about the race results. Of course, through the first portion of a race, you want to be easy with one another. You want to cut each other breaks because you know you have to get to the end of the race first. But at this point, you have to start thinking about how you're going to get to that end of the race. They go by the slower number 36. That's a BMW, and that is Daniel Huerta. So they go on by him. He's in 23rd overall, 17th in the GT4 category, and they'll battle up the hill once more. And again, DJ is going to keep trying to show the nose, rather, and just, I think, spook Paul into a mistake. Yeah,
and that's kind of the nature of this race versus thinking back to COTA, round 1. That was absolutely starting to take place, where what you were just talking about, where they were just kind of laying back and falling into formation. Everybody was really patient on that round. And then all of a sudden, the full course caution came out and threw a wrench into that plan. Last week at Donington, this is much more of what we saw, where it's just kind of jockeying for position at all times. And all three of these drivers know that this race is far more likely to come out like Donington was, with all of the lap traffic and with the limited passing opportunities. And they may also be afraid of that full course caution, because no one expected that to come out, and it really changed the makeup of that race. But these three still pulling away, now up to 7 seconds ahead of Chris Lapras, who has been chased down by Alex LaRose. So that 7 car, like you said, is quick. And I think we're seeing the Porsche's consistency starting to pull away from Andrew Pilata and Jonathan White in those BMWs. They're far off in the distance, back in 7th and 6th right now.
Yeah, our top-running BMWs, all three in a row right there. Pilata, White, and Chow. Thomas Layton also in the top 10. He's a BMW. He is 4th place. Andrew Kessel, he breaks up that change of BMWs. So it's, what, 6 Porsches, 4 BMWs up in the front running. That's actually quite impressive. We do have a change for the race lead, though. Alessandrini finally finds an opening, and oh my, how Seal charges the Corkscrew and falls back on exit. We will have a replay of that, I do believe, and we will, so we'll take a look at how this lead change happens. Very, very surprised.
Yeah, DJ wasn't very close, so he gets a decent run up from turn 5 into turn 6, but I think we're going to see Darling go a little bit wide, drop 2 tires, almost 4 off, lose a bit of momentum, and DJ Alessandrini just easily breezes on up the inside. So now they're about equal distance between the 3 of them. This is about the largest gap we've seen between these 3 cars this entire race, too. Now cleared half distance with 18.5 minutes left.
So the top 3 back into the order that they were in when Seal initially had his mistake where he cut the back end of the Corkscrew, went off track a little bit and had to give up some time. So whatever mistake had happened, whatever issue had happened for the 61 of Alessandrini, now nullified by the fact that Darling just went off the racetrack kind of on his own there on the exit of turn 6. Andrew Kessel and Thomas Layton actually, oh my, side by side through the Andretti hairpin. They've got a TCR they just went by as well. I'm sure that played into this battle, and they'll stay side by side through 3.
This is for 9th, and this is the cool part. These are the newer corners we were mentioning on the track walk, or track map walkthrough. They're very flat, and they're pretty easy to go side by side through because there's just not a lot of grip anywhere. So if you can swing the outside with a little higher speed, looks like the BMW is going to go super defensive down into turn 6, but checks up a little too much, and that's going to allow Kessel to get a run back on Layton up the inside. Can he sweep across the nose before turn 6? No, the BMW's legs stretch before turn in, and now finally has to relinquish the position.
Yeah, it seems like these cars are aggressive at different points of the corner. The BMW is a little harder charging into the corner. They can be a little more aggressive on initial turn in just because they can point the nose a little better. But on corner exit, once you squat the rear end of the Porsche, man, it just takes off. And it takes a long straightaway for the BMW to catch up. That was a great catch there by Layton. He could have been off in the gravel and had a really bad time. Thankfully, he kept the car on the racetrack. I think maybe just a checkup of the brakes for Andrew Kessel caught him off guard.
Yeah, perhaps a bit of target fixation on the back of the 13 car, and realized he was in pretty hot, had to check up hard. Now we move up to the battle between White, Pilata, and Chow, and actually Jonathan White got through in the yellow BMW, moving Andrew Pilata back 1 position, who's in the green BMW, and Tony Chow in the white car is on full attack, but potentially having a little bit of connection issues. Not sure if he popped off track for a second, but there he is. And this is the battle for 6th.
Jonathan White in the 25 car, the yellow and blue BMW. He's in the 6th spot. Pilata in 7th. Chow, he's in the white BMW. He's in 8th place. Christopher Lapras has been passed by Alex LaRose, so I would expect the 7 car actually to start maintaining the gap ahead, if not cutting in to Ken House Seal and Company up there, battling amongst the podium positions. I would not be surprised to see the 7 cars start to chip away at that race lead. Back to our TCR category, and it's a battle for the race lead, just like the GT4 category, now a trio under a blanket.
Yeah, somehow David Alessi has found some pace or got some gifts in traffic, and he's come back up to the battle for the lead. Still Elias Roman at the point, but Robert Crucera, last time we saw him was maybe 5 or 6 car lengths back. It's down to 1 car length. and they're going to chuck those TCR cars into turn number 4. A big flat slide at the apex, and the tires are probably starting to fall away a bit at this point. 15 minutes to go, so we're two-thirds into the race distance, and the front tires of these TCR cars, front-wheel drive, even though they're Audis, and they get quite a bit of a workout over this long race distance. Look at how racy Kucera is looking. Not quite as aggressive as DJ Alessandrini, but he's really close. Does he pop for the corkscrew? No, backs off.
And I'd imagine these guys will be okay staying single file. They'll be content racing like this for a few more laps. They'll stay this way probably through about the 10 minutes to go mark, and then I think it's going to be gloves off at that point. They're going to start chucking moves at one another. Again, you see the running order at the top left mixing up a little bit when we go back to the TCRs. Do not be alarmed. That has not changed up front for the GT4 category. We'll go back out to that in a moment, and we appreciate everybody bearing with us for that part. But this TCR battle is starting to heat up, and we just can't leave it because Alessi can absolutely sit back here, either wait for a mistake or inject himself into this battle here soon and really change things up.
And I think that might actually be part of Kucera's plan. He knows from MX5 Cup racing, remember we said he's really good at that, he knows that when you pick a fight, you lose a lot of time. So he might be seeing Alessi real close and just kind of waiting for his opportunity to go by Elias Roman. And this race is really taking an alarmingly similar shape to last week's race, where Robert Kucera was just kind of lurking in the background, and all of a sudden the lead came to him and he was able to take over the point and run away with it. Looks like Elias Roman might have raw pace in the car for a lap in qualifying, but struggles with a longer race distance as he's going very defensive down into turn 5, shuts the door, and Kucera doesn't push the issue much, but that's kind of a good MX5 Cup driver mindset. Just once you can take the spot, grab it aggressively, but otherwise don't force the issue too much and don't lose yourself too much time, because look at how much closer Alessi is just with that small exchange.
And of course, I think two really important things come out of Spec Miata Racing that transition yourself pretty good for this Audi TCR class. The first thing being rolling nose to tail like this for a long period of time and having to get really used to close quarter racing, largely out the front and out the rear of your car, but also being able to chuck the car into the corner and hold it correctly. And each car is going to be a little bit different in that regard, but you've really got to chuck Miatas into corners, especially the NC that we have here on the sim, the legacy car, but even the global MX-5 that we have, the ND Miata, you got to really chuck it into a corner and really commit. And I think that transitions pretty well into this Audi as well.
Yeah, I agree. A little bit of lap traffic interference there. No harm, no foul for sure, but that was the 41 of Ted Dorshelf, getting letting the leaders of TCR through. So the TCR leaders are back into their own traffic at this point with 12.5 minutes to go. Kucera just looks quicker through this infield section, though. Look at him close up the distance. A little bit more trail braking, a little bit more composed, and he's back on the bumper.
Whoa!
Oh, a wreck in front. Oh, they just missed him.
Thankfully, Alessi gets by. Who is that Porsche that's turned around? That is the 100 car of Calvin Wong, and he was the last of the GT4 cars before this TCR field as well, and he has turned around. Heavy contact for him. That really caught us both off guard. I can only imagine being in the race car for that. This is the replay of Calvin Wong's issues, and out of turn 4, we'll see what happens to him. This is right in front of the leaders as well, just goes off the racetrack. That's what I was talking about earlier as well. In the rear-wheel drive GT4 cars, wow, Alessi barely gets by. In the rear-wheel drive GT4 cars, along with most cars that you end up driving on a daily basis, you get off into the dirt and the car is going to spin around on you. It's going to want to hook around. You get off track in a TCR, though, and it's going to pull you further off the racetrack. In that case, of course, Calvin Wong gets spun around. Now almost contact. That's Lapras on the inside of him going by, and Lapras is fourth. Now across the racetrack right in front of Pilata. Oh, my.
Yeah, that spin put him right in the front of the GT4 leaders, and he's gotten very lucky to all of these incidents that he's suffering, just barely getting missed by the leaders of both classes. But we also just saw Andrew Pilata got back by Jonathan White as they were lapping Calvin Wong here. So that green BMW is back in front. He's the top BMW, which is a bit of a point of pride, I'm sure, to be the top finishing of the make. That was some excitement at the front of both classes there for that lap.
Yeah, definitely Code Brown moments for both sets of leaders. In fact, speaking of the leaders, Alessandrini continues to lead. We're now at 11 minutes to go in this one, round 3 at Laguna Seca for the Washington, D.C. Region Virtual Racing League. Man, it has certainly been a hell of a time so far. This is amazing stuff that each category of racing has put on so far. You see dropping a wheel there for Paul Darling in second place. Paul led some laps. In fact, all three of these front runners in the GT4 class have each led some laps. So they can definitely get it done, but they've all had something go wrong to transition that lead back over.
Well, and we mentioned at the top of the broadcast that within the last 5 to 10 minutes, the top of GT4 will catch the top of TCR. We are within that range now, and looking at the gaps, they're probably within about 3 laps of catching the lead trio in TCR. Ooh, big break for Ken Hauseal. That's really unfortunate. Gets split from the leaders.
There was contact.
GT4 actually picks the wrong side and gets a little bit balked by the TCR car, who now dives off the track. That's the 41 again of Ted Dorshelf, and toward Ted Dorchef, sorry, and again, that's going to make it really challenging for the leaders of both categories, because they're running in those packs of 3, and they're going to intersect with one another somewhere in the next, I suspect, 6 to 7 minutes.
Certainly before this one's done. And yeah, that was really close for Hauseal. He actually made some contact going down turn 9 at first. I think we'll see a little bit of damage to his car here. A little bit of right front damage, and then he got the turtle, and then he made more contact into 11 trying to get back that 41 car. But they still battle in both categories. So this is the TCR battle, just to reset you a little bit. This is Elias Roman still leading the way, and Robert Kucera second place, David Alessi in third. Then if you go back up to the GT4 category, moving around a lot, I know. Alice Andrini, they're already headed up towards the Corkscrew, where we just saw the leaders in the TCR field turn in, so it's that much. It is just a handful of seconds between these two fields of race cars, particularly the two sets of leaders, so that's really going to mess with the end of this race.
Yeah, they're within about 7 seconds of each other on the track, which is down to under 3 laps of track time, with the lap times being right at about 1 minute and 28 seconds. So I think we're definitely going to see this spark ignite some excitement at the end of this DC Region Virtual Racing League. Round number 3 of 9 on the season. So they're now working their way up to the back of Murphy Nichols, who runs 4th. He's pretty lonely in TCR, so hopefully he's able to make himself invisible without much. Yes, checks the brakes and is going to let these two get by. Ken Hauseal will have to get a gift a little bit later on, but if he keeps his composure, those two are going to start racing, and when they intersect the battle for TCR lead, things could get really interesting for GT4 and could swing back into Ken Hauseal's hands.
Yeah, Ken's not out of this yet, but this is now the front 2 battle. The duo at the front of the GT4 class. Paul Darling trying to chase back down to get up to the back end of DJ Alessandrini in the 61. I'm sure he can get there pretty easily, but getting there and getting around are 2 different stories. So Paul definitely has his work cut out for him. Now 7.5 minutes to go. You see the gap between the entire top 3 on your screen there. Let's recheck in with the back end, or I guess the rest of the GT4 field that we were talking about a little while ago. Alex LaRose, we see him in 4th place all alone right now. He's gotten away from Christopher Lapras, and Christopher might actually be in trouble of losing that top 5 position to Andrew Pilata.
Yeah, I was going to say Lapras has really dropped off of LaRose's pace, which has been really strong, and Pilata, once he was clear of Jonathan White, something must have happened to White, because he's nowhere to be found. Now it's Tony Chow who sits in the 7th spot, but Pilata has been reeling in Lapras little by little, up until about this lap, where there's about 1.5 seconds between the two. So there's within sight of each other, but not yet within striking distance. Closing in on 5 minutes to go, and this thing's going to get exciting.
And we'll go back to the battle up front in the TCR field. It has not changed one bit. It's still the 34 of Alessi chasing down Kucera, and I think just trying to keep tabs on these two. Again, if anything happens, he's right there for it, but if you get too close, you're going to lose front downforce and start to push in the corners, so you've got to be careful if you're Alessi, especially if you're Hauseal, but coming from those Spec Miata routes, I think he's a little more used to following in behind somebody and managing that difference in downforce. And you mentioned it at COTA, I believe, where these TCRs are much more race modified than the GT4 cars. Tell us about the differences of the 2 categories like that.
But yeah, the TCR cars, being a front-wheel drive touring car, are a little bit fundamentally flawed in most people's opinion anyway, where the front-wheel drive car has to do all the work through the front tires. So to make them as fast as they are, they have a lot more downforce. They're tuned up a little bit more like a race car would be if it was built from the ground up, versus the GT4 cars, which are built off of a faster starting platform, obviously with the BMW M4, Porsche Cayman. Other cars would include the AMG GT4, the Mustang, Camaro, cars like that are faster out of the factory, so they don't need to be modified nearly as much. You see less aerodynamics on those cars, and they make speed in a little bit different ways. So there are sections, especially in the braking zones and some of the higher speed corners here at Laguna Seca, where the TCR cars are just as fast, if not faster, than the GT4 cars. And as we say that, they are now all 6 in frame. We have the top 3 of TCR, the top 3 of GT4, and they're all closing in on some more TCR traffic. So they have every aspect of multi-class racing about to happen all at the same time.
And this is great that it's coming perfectly at the end of this 40-minute race here at Laguna Seca. Within the last 5 minutes here, they've officially caught up to one another. You see Alessandrini right on the back end of David Alessi there. He's third place in the TCR field, and these guys, they're the GT4 leaders. Alessi off the racetrack right in front of DJ. Will DJ try and challenge it to 6? No, he's going to sit in behind. That's going to allow Paul Darling up to the back end of him. Of course, these guys are both racing for race wins. All 6, and Paul Darling around now, going to make it all 5.
So unfortunate, as he had such a great run going. It looks like he's just going to call it and drop out of this battle. So Alessandrini's been able to get around Alessi, and now Hausil looks to the outside. Not going to be able to make that work, I don't think, but Alessi looks like he's got a pretty big push in that 34 car. Now Hausil dives to the inside. It's still just a top 2 for GT4 now, as one of our contenders dropped out, Paul Darling, and now Alessandrini to the outside, protecting from Kucera. Shuts the door on the way into turn 11, and whoa, look at how Seal sweeping around the outside of Alessi in 11.
Yeah, Alessi challenged him into 11. Here comes DJ going by both these cars. This has really blown the GT4 battle to bits, but it's only accentuated the TCR battle. Oh my, that was a really late move for Roman to block, but hey, it works out. Elias Roman blocks that move, the possible move there from second place Kucera. Now you're going to see how Seal go to the inside of Kucera and blow that battle to bits. So really, the two battles coming into one another, actually that's a slow BMW off ahead of these guys. Thankfully not going to be an element to this one. Now Hausil going to look to the left side of Roman, but that really changed things up and is really going to play into DJ's hands. Oh, almost contact into the braking zone of turn 5.
Yeah, look how good those TCR cars are on the brakes, but I think the timing of how all of that played out, with DJ being able to motor by the majority of the TCR cars up that front straightaway, kind of sealed the deal on this one. He is the black and teal speck at this point up in the distance as we ride along with Kucera. And unfortunately, Kucera was probably hoping for his time to shine in all of that exchange, and it didn't really present itself. There was nowhere for him to go, even in all those exchanges between the classes. So now Kucera's got to light the wick. They're coming up to 2 to go, so it's not going to be the white flag this time. It'll be one more lap and then white. But it looks like Roman still has a little bit of gas left in the tank after reeling a bit in the middle of this one. Kucera doesn't seem to have the pace that he did 10 minutes ago.
Well, and of course, once you get thrown out of your rhythm like that, it's hard to get back into it, especially when your heart rate's beating, your adrenaline rises, and you realize it's the end of the race like this. So it's going to be difficult for all of these guys to get back into their usual rhythm. I think that's why you see Hausil starting to chip back away at the race lead of DJ Alessandrini. For sure, though, Kucera, I think he's still got pace. He's right now right to the back end of Elias Roman, just like he was for so long, and this battle is still very well and alive. We'll keep tabs on the battle ahead for the GT4 lead, but these two are going to start going at it here very, very shortly.
Yeah, you're completely right. Kucera was so confident and so fast on the way into the Andretti hairpin. Just on entries in general, he's got that car set up just right, that it's floating into the corners. And actually, that makes me, just in the moment, think back to qualifying. I pointed out how loose that car was. He might have been playing the long game the whole time. That car might have been a handful early on in this race. He's going to poke to the outside, going up to the corkscrew. They're side by side. Just a little bit of overlap between these two cars. This is for the lead in TCR, and Kucera is going to get really aggressive. A little bit of a balk as Roman juked on the way into the corner and is going to protect that position. That's a really tough spot to make anything happen, but I think you're completely right. Kucera definitely still has car under him. He's going to get one more lap to get it done.
And that was a lot of confidence from Elias Roman as well to move back over and take the apex of the back end of the corkscrew. So he knew what was going on, and he knew that Kucera couldn't hang through the corkscrew right there. Moved back over and took his line. Now, under a minute to go, I believe we should get the white flag. We are now on lap 27 of 27. The white flag is in the air. This is it for these guys, for both classes. This is their moment to shine, and Kucera challenges to the outside of the Andretti hairpin, now crosses him over, almost a shot in the shorts. Oh, he got to him, but he had to check up to not wreck him.
Yeah, Roman's doing a perfect job putting that car exactly where Kucera is trying to go, and predicting exactly where Kucera is going to try to make that move happen, but he's staying exactly in the way. Perfectly fairly so, but exactly in a way that Kucera's got nowhere to go at this speed. And it's just a two-car battle at this point. Alessi's off the back end, and they're not going to have to deal with any more traffic for the rest of this race. So the number 2 car's got, I think, 2 more chances left. Maybe the corkscrew and maybe turn 11, unless he gets really creative. He gets a good run through 6. Going to try the outside one more time. Looks to the right.
Up the hill goes Kucera. He's going to try and challenge into the corkscrew. Sideways. Oh, door contact. Door-to-door banging. And that's going to shove Kucera off onto the dirt. That's going to blow that battle to bits. I wonder how those two are going to feel about that one after that. This may even change up the battle for second place. Alessi getting to the back end of Kucera. Now going to challenge into 9, and he's going to take it. Meanwhile, DJ Alessandrini out of the final corner is going to come along and collect his race win here at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca over Ken Hausiel, and Elias Roman is going to leave turn 11 a race winner as well, and he is going to win round 3 over Robert Kucera, and David Alessi ends up taking second place. How about that? He hung back, and he did exactly what he needed to do. He waited on that opportunity to get an extra spot at the end of things. Let's also not forget Alex LaRose, who came back and got a podium.
Yeah, I think looking back to that TCR exchange in the last half of that last lap, both cars got so light coming into the corkscrew. I don't know if we have it on replay, but both cars got really light coming into the corkscrew with Kucera. Had that run, and as soon as both cars went light, they kind of went into opposite trajectories, ended up dooring each other. I don't know that I have much blame on either driver for that one, to be honest, but it was Robert Kucera. Here we're going to take a look at it. So Kucera's going to get a good run in the 2-car. Up the outside of the 99. There's that perfect execution of turn 6. Gets one wheel alongside, but watch as they crest here. Both cars are going to get light on the brakes and just kind of head towards one another. They pop on the brakes at the same time. Cars both float, and Kucera has a little bit more wheel in it. They float towards each other. Clunk. Obviously not necessary, but I think it was a little bit unavoidable as both cars were right on the limit, pushing so hard for this battle. And then right here, we're going to see Kucera actually get a cut penalty because he puts all 4 tires off on the inside of the corkscrew, which is what allowed David Alessi to get around, because Alessi, as Kucera was bleeding off that time penalty. Here's one more look at it. You see Kucera's car just takes kind of an odd plant, shoots a little bit left, and then they're going to clunk off of one another. The 2-car ends up going through the dirt, and he's going to get a little bit of a time penalty for that one, which he had to slow down for, and Alessi takes second.
It's almost like Kucera just kind of followed the rubber into the corner, where, of course, I think Elias Roman was following the shape of the racetrack a little bit more, and they just kind of met in the middle. It's nothing that either one is at fault for, just racing for a race win for sure. And they came together in the middle, and unfortunately, it ends up really biting Kucera, and it sends him at least to third place. I don't think the time penalty is going to be any concern for him. I think he gave up enough time to hold on to the podium spot, but still, that's heartbreaking for him. Not quite as heartbreaking as it was for Paul Darling. Losing control out of turn 6 once more, actually, for that 155. Exactly how he lost the lead. Just goes off the racetrack and the car comes around. But, man, that is really rough to see for Robert Kucera, who I think absolutely had better pace, but it's not always the fastest car who wins. You've got to execute on every level.
Yeah, and massive props to Elias Roman to stay cool in that entire race situation. Not only stay cool, but just perfectly execute the defensive the entire time to put that car exactly where Kucera was thinking of going, being one step ahead at all times. And that's what allowed him to defend the way into that corkscrew 2 laps in a row and ultimately get him the win. And then back in GT4, DJ Alessandrini was racy when he needed to be, took the point when he needed it. And then kind of inherited a rather large 2-second win over Ken House-Seal, with Paul Darling dropping out of this one. Alex LaRose rallied some really fast laps there at the end and came home third.
We'll be talking to each of our podium finishers here very, very soon. So stand by momentarily. We're just going to step aside just so we can coordinate that. We'll be right back to you here at Sim TV, watching now post-race coverage of the Washington, D.C. Region Virtual Racing League. Amazing stuff here at Laguna Seca, and I cannot wait to hear what these drivers think of it. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. We just saw what even Tom thinks might be one of the best rounds yet. That was properly amazing stuff for 40 minutes of racing here for the Washington, D.C. Region Virtual Racing League. Amazing racing through and through, and we're going to get to talk to each of our podium finishers between both categories. Of course, we're going to start with Robert Kucera. So we'll bring in third place finishing Robert Kucera. And Robert, I think heartbreak there on the last lap, but an amazing run that you put together to challenge Elias Roman for the race win.
Yeah, I didn't want the stream to be too boring, so I knew I had to at least try something. And I mean, it all usually comes down to the corkscrew, and I was just not strong there all race. But I knew I was just going to try and stick my line and try to run it through them. But unfortunately, got a little offline and picked up some penalties for going off course. But it's all good. So in the end, it was some nice, clean racing and some fast times. That's for sure.
Absolutely a wonderful time watching you guys battle. Who do you have to shout out? Who do you have to give thanks to supporting you here in that number 2 car and battling for race wins?
Yeah, probably the biggest one would be the ABS on the TCR car. I need to start saving up my pennies and get myself some load cell pedals because the ABS is definitely working that race.
Well, Robert, you certainly gave us a lot to talk about this evening. Congrats on what was almost a possible race win, and we'll be talking to you later throughout the season.
Yeah, hopefully see you guys in the future.
That's Robert Kucera starting third, finishing third this evening. Amazing stuff out of that number 2. We'll transition over to the GT4 category, third place finisher. Tom, I will hand you Alex LaRose.
Yeah, we got Alex in here. Alex, third place in GT4, and you qualified third and fell back a little bit on that first lap, but kept it cool and was really quick there towards the end. How was the race for you?
Yeah, I had that abysmal start, and I was pretty frustrated with myself, but I tried to climb my way back through. I'm not sure what happened to Paul Darling, but I think he probably deserves to be here.
Yeah, inherited that third spot late in the race, but it was still an impressive charge and impressive pace from the 7 car all evening. So congratulations on that. We'll see you next week.
Congrats to Ken and DJ as well.
And that's Alex LaRose starting third and finishing third in the GT4 category as well. So a consistent theme going on here, I dare say. We'll transition up to second place, finishing David Alessi. And David, it was a pretty solid run from you as well, just kind of waiting your turn in that TCR battle, and eventually, when the opportunity presented itself, taking advantage to get second place.
Yeah, I tell you, I wasn't quite expecting that. Rob got a slowdown and basically just kind of handed it to me. I was at that point, I was content with third. I caught back up to them a couple times, and I'd fall back, back to 7/10 or so. And Rob got the slowdown. I was able to get by, but man, that was his second place. I'll admit it.
Well, hey, in the end, you still end up picking up the extra spot. It may not be necessarily the way you want to grab positions, usually want to battle for it, but still, you finished second, and I think you deserve to finish there. The 34 was quick all evening long. Who do you have to give thanks to? Who do you have to shout out this evening?
Oh man, everybody here, you guys putting this on, Dave Fitzgerald for putting this on. It's all a big group effort.
David, thank you for your time, and best of luck to you out there the rest of the season.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Tom, we gonna see you in one of these races here shortly?
I don't know. After watching that one, these races have been so fun to call. I got to stick in here.
I hear you. I'm sure it was fun to watch. I'll find out here in a little bit.
Yeah, it was a blast for sure. And then back over on the GT4 side, we got Ken Hauseal picking up a second spot. We'll get him down in here. And Ken, I think the pace was there, started second place, right, pretty close to DJ, but consistency was the one that ended up getting you, I think, today. Is that the case in your race, or was there other challenges?
Yeah, man. got in the lead. I'm like, so on the first lap, Alex raced real hard, like no problem there. And then, so I had a bit of a gap to DJ, and then he made a mistake. I got ahead, and then I made a mistake in the corkscrew, and I bombed out the car real bad and got a course cut and a little bit of damage. So it was a little pushy from there, and then it was just trying to keep up with them. And we were all running about the same pace, and it was just like none of us wanted to win the race apparently.
Yeah, trading mistakes back and forth, and came up a little bit short, but still a really strong run, especially for the championship. So congrats on second.
Thanks,
That's Ken Hauseal finishing second place in the GT4 category. If you haven't noticed, every one of these guys so far, I think, has started and finished second place, which is very interesting. And the theme is going to continue with Elias Roman, who takes away the TCR win. And Elias, an amazing qualifying effort, an amazing run in this race, but it wasn't always without challenge. Tell us about that battle there with Kyocera breathing down your neck.
That was literally the hardest online race I've probably ever won, to be honest. I was just trying to baby it, try to learn my lessons from Donington to not push it so hard in the beginning, kind of save some for the end. But yeah, Rob was on my tail the entire time. I do feel bad at the corkscrew. I tried to leave him room, but the car just wouldn't turn anymore. We kind of made slight contact, and it kind of just forced him into the course cut. So I do apologize to him. I apologize to him already, but yeah, he's good with it. But yeah, definitely a well-earned win, to say the least.
Hey, sometimes it happens in racing. You're gonna get together eventually, and I think that was just heads-up racing at that point in time. Congratulations, big time, on this race win here at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. Who do you have to thank? Who do you have to shout out?
I have to thank Jason for giving me the setup, because I legit was struggling all week trying to find the right setup, and I just had no confidence in the car. And even practice earlier today, I was still fiddling with the settings. I also have to thank my friend Mike Altino for kind of sponsoring the car for Silver Style Racing. And I also have to give a huge shout out to my Gran Turismo Club, GBRC, because the spec racing and stuff, they kind of like trained me for like these moments and stuff to not crack under pressure.
Well, certainly not cracking under pressure this evening. Even when you guys were alongside each other, you hold on for first place this evening. Congratulations. I'm sure we'll be talking to you a lot more this season.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
That's Elias Roman wrapping up the evening with a big fat dub this evening, but somebody else got one as well. It's DJ Alessandrini. Tom, take it away.
Yeah, I like that. A big fat dub. And DJ Alessandrini takes the top spot. And DJ, Ken alluded to in his interview that this was a little bit of the race that nobody wanted to win, as you guys all had kind of trading mistakes, but you turned on the afterburners after your mistake, got aggressive when you needed to be, and then were able to take the win.
I peaked in quali. My quali lap was the best lap I've ever executed, probably in a GT4 car. I felt pretty good about that, and then went to go grid up, and my wheel like kicked really hard to the left and then died, and I tried to reboot it. I removed myself off a grid. I asked one of my buddies not to grid so the race wouldn't start while I wasn't gridded. I was messing around with the wheel trying to figure out what it was. They told me there's like 10 seconds to go, so I gridded with my wheel broken, figured it out while the pace lap was happening, and then I was screaming I was 7th as I found my way back up to the front of the pack. So I started off with a little bit of chaos, and I don't think I ever quite recovered from that mentally. I never got like my calm zen place to just like put in laps, and I feel like my driving showed that tonight. I feel like Paul Darling was the fastest driver tonight, but it was really just like who made the least amount of mistakes, and I guess that was me, and I'll take it. It didn't go exactly the way I wanted it to, but it's very, Ken and Paul make it very tough to not make mistakes, basically, because they're right there, and they're kind of intimidating.
Yeah, well, when you watch the race back, you'll know that you're probably the only driver that the race peaked at the start and got less exciting throughout, if that's how you're feeling, because that was one of the best ones we've had yet. And you extend your championship lead going into the 4th round, so congratulations on the win.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. And thanks, Andrew, for joining us tonight.
Hey, congratulations, DJ. That was an amazing race.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And DJ ends up walking away with that big race win. Again, it really did seem like the race that nobody wanted to win, but they...
that definitely explains some stuff on the start. So if that all excitement happened before, I know I've had races that are chaos before the green flag, and it's absolutely one of the hardest things to come back from. So to even just stay cool enough to somewhat be composed enough to come back with a win, even if it took other drivers to have mistakes, that's impressive enough in itself. So impressive performances to stay cool in very different circumstances from both race winners.
Yeah, I had no clue what was happening there when he was trying to go back by everybody. I was wondering why he was so far back there to begin with, and that explains all of it. And that's a proper job then, especially lap 1, when nerves are already high, to keep under control like that. That is very impressive, and speaks volumes as to DJ Alessandrini's skill, at least here on iRacing.com. Amazing stuff. We do, of course, want to go over our race results before we leave this evening, and we'll just get right into it. I'll hand the top 10 over to Tom.
We start with TCR or GT4? In GT4, it was DJ Alessandrini taking the win. Talked to him just there. Ken Houseel 2nd. Alex LaRose stayed cool for 3rd. Chris Lapras was able to bring home 4th over our top BMW driver, Andrew Pawada, with Tony Chow. Jonathan White also in BMWs down into the second half of the top 10. Tom Slayton, Danny Gross, and Andrew Kessel started 10th and finished there.
For roll back to 11th place overall, we have Ryan Maloney in the 15 car. He looked like he had some speed there for a little while, then eventually just fell back. He ends up a minute and 1 second behind race winner DJ Alessandrini. You see Evan Schickel there as well. In 12th spot, Scott Merker, Mark Labance in 14th, Francois Brou in the 15th spot. Andrew Chow ends up falling all the way back to 16th. Very odd for him as well, considering he was almost in the top 10 there for a little bit. Then you have race winner, Elias Roman, in the TCR category. Great stuff out of that number 99. He ends up, he's showing us one lap down there, of course, because these are overall results, but oh man, that was amazing stuff for that battle. And now it all gets a bit mixed up on us here, but we'll try and get that sort of back out for you. And there we go. So we'll pick up where we left off there in the back end of the top 20 overall. David Alessi, second place in the TCR category. You see Robert Cusera and Murphy Nichols as well. Continuing right along in the overall results, though, you got Will Robbins in 5th place in the Audi TCR category, Peter Lausen in 6th, then David Thompson checks in at 17th in the GT4 category. That would be 23rd overall. Calvin Wong, after his amazing saves trying to keep it out of the race leaders there, I'm really thankful he got it out of the race leaders and that he goes on to finish just one lap down, and looks like he held on to the car the rest of the way. Ends up 18th spot in his category. Benson Ty there in 7th in the Audi TCR field. Ted Doroshev. We got Chris Spiller from the GT4 class. Darren Heath. Louis Alessi in 9th place in the TCR class, along with Andrej Blanc to finish up the top 10.
And an unfortunate heartbreak for Paul Darling with that last lap, or second last lap. Small mistake, big consequences. Drops out down to 21st overall in GT4, and that's going to hurt his championship run pretty significantly as well. Daniel Huertas, Travis Trussell, Chad Griffith, Greg Hubler and Kevin Zhu, Sam Scott, all in GT4 cars, struggling early on, completing less than half the laps of the race. And then in the TCR side, 11th, Darren Treacle also had some issues, along with John Chrissy and Brian McCrae.
Moving on through the field, I think we have 3 more cars to go to round out our 43-car grid. Jason LaManna in the number 18 in TCR competition. You see Lex Kiricek there in 28th in GT4, along with Francis Castillo Romero in 29th in GT4. And actually, based on the lap counts, I don't think anybody but, I think Jason might have made the start, but Lex and Francis apparently did not. So that is all 43 cars here this evening, Tom, and you know, stepping in Kyle Heyer's shoes is never easy, but you guys certainly made it easy on me between Dave Fitzgerald and everybody else here at the Washington, D.C. Region Virtual Racing League. Of course, Kyle made it pretty easy on me, doing his best to make sure I was all set up, and this was a wild time. That was amazing racing, so the drivers made it pretty easy too.
Yeah, and this is one of the best rounds we've had. I think we've said that after all 3 races so far this season, but absolutely, without a doubt, one of the best races we've seen so far in both categories, just keeping it exciting the entire time. And we are working our way well into mid-season with the Winter 2020 Washington, D.C. Region's Virtual Racing League. And we have one more of these 40-minute races next week at Imola, which is a very different track than a lot of these drivers are used to. We talked about that at Donington Park. This is a track that's going to challenge people to break outside of the mold of tracks they may have seen normally. And then after Imola, we move to round 5, which is Sebring, and that's going to be a 90-minute endurance race instead of a 40-minute endurance race. So things are going to start to get shifted around here a little bit format-wise as we work our way into the middle of the 2020 season. But I don't think things are going to get any less exciting.
You will not want to miss the rest of the season here for the Washington, D.C. Region Virtual Racing League. I'm super impressed by all of these drivers. I didn't know all of these guys until this evening, and blown away by the competition here in this series, and I'm definitely going to have to check in whether I'm with you guys or not. Just as a fan, I think I'll have to check into the rest of these races. Of course, you can watch them all again on SimTV the rest of the season. That concludes our coverage tonight, though, of the Washington, D.C. Region Virtual Racing League. We at SimTV thank you for tuning in and joining us for tonight's action, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. Be sure to join us again on Friday for the USCS Ferrari Challenge at Brands Hatch, Saturday for the Outsider Racing League at Road Atlanta. And since I am from over at Pit Stop TV, if you guys aren't doing anything Sunday, I urge everybody to step over to Pit Stop TV for the Operation E Motorsport iRace of Remembrance presented by Recaro. It's a 6-hour endurance event at Sebring International Raceway utilizing the GT4 cars you just watched this evening. Kyle told me I could put that little bit in the end, and it's going to be a really cool event. Operation Motorsport is a motorsports foundation putting injured, rehabilitating, recovering vets into motorsport roles. I think everybody can get behind a foundation like that. So definitely check out what's going on Sunday. Going to have competition from 11:15 to 5:15 with some pre and post race before and after. For all of Sim TV, Tom O'Gorman with me on the mic. I'm Andrew Carter IV. And for Sim TV once more, we will see you next time. Thank you for watching and have a great night.